Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown.
The sinister painting. When I was in college, I was living with roommates in a 5 bedroom house just outside the city. The house was built before any of the surrounding neighborhood existed, so it was pretty old. It sat sideways on our street. The right side had this fancy porch and front door. It was a duplex, and that side of the house was owned by a guy who lived alone. He made a lot of money in whatever it was that he did for a living and clearly traveled a lot as he was rarely home. Our side was obviously once the back of the house. So the house had been split down the middle sometime after it had been built, and you could tell. A staircase was squeezed in randomly in the back hallway. The basement door had just been walled off, stuff like that. There were big gaps between the wall and the floor in some places, and in one of them you could even see several scraps of paper with barely legible writing on them. It was just a weird, quirky house. But we were a quirky group of people, mostly art students attending the several art schools in our city, so it was perfect for us. We constantly had people graduating and moving back home, so the rooms changed hands quite a few times. The walls were decorated with paintings and sculptures from both roommates and friends. One particular painting always seemed to catch people's attention, even though it didn't necessarily stand out much. It just sort of had a presence. One of the original roommates had painted it. It was based on a bust that she had seen somewhere of an old woman, and she had painted it as if it were a person, giving it skin tone and texture. I had joked about the painting ever since I first saw it, how it just creeped me out from the moment I saw it. My bedroom was the only one on the first floor, and the painting sat at the top of the stairs. This meant I had to walk right by it to go to the bathroom. It bothered me, but not enough to do anything about it at first. Eventually, though, it got to be too much. Something about it just wasn't sitting right with me. So late at night, when the house was dark and quiet, I couldn't even stand to walk by it at that point. I had sort of reached that point. I would go out of my way to use the back stairs to the bathroom, or in very desperate moments, I would even go outside. Eventually, I went to my roommate in confidence, not sure how to approach the situation. I told her that I loved her art, and even this painting was technically impressive. It just affected me somewhere deep down, and I could no longer deal with it. She was so understanding, and we rotated the artwork in the house so that this painting was now in the living room. Here's where things get a little strange. I think this upset the painting, this move. It was almost instantly that weird crap started happening. My roommates and I would talk about how uneasy it felt in the house sometimes, like there might be some kind of presence there or something. It started off as a joke, but as time went on, we all started to take it more seriously. Our first summer in the house came around, and some of us went back with our families and sublet our rooms. I stayed behind as I had nowhere to really go at the time. One of the rooms on the top floor went to a girl that we found on Craigslist. The roommate, M, who contacted her, had admittedly never lived for an extended period of time with people that she liked, so she always sublet her rooms this way. The subletter, K, was odd from the get-go. I met her one night when I came home from work. She was just kind of hanging out in the living room with M, talking about whatever. M had an exasperated look on her face and asked me if I would go to the store with her. Kay came along with us, tried to get some ice cream but couldn't pay, so I paid for her. We walked back to the house and Kay decided to head home, got on her bike and left. M breathed a huge sigh of relief and then told me that K had only come by for a quick tour, but ended up staying for 8 hours. She just wouldn't take the hint to leave, and since she didn't technically live there, M hadn't wanted to leave her alone. So she's awkward, I thought, and brushed it off. Kay came back about a week later to give us a check and stayed for 6 hours this time. Again, no one was really sure what to do. A few weeks after that, Kay moved in. She kept to herself mostly, but all of our interactions with her were kind of insane. She carried around a blonde wig at all times. I never saw her wear it, she just always had it. She insisted on keeping a mini fridge in the bathroom for her cooking ingredients, claiming that the fridge in the kitchen overwhelmed her. She had a hammock that she strung up on the side of the house and would sleep out there more often than inside. All of her possessions were in a trunk that sat in the living room, and I eventually caught her trying to coax out a mouse that had been living in this trunk. She often came home with different guys who worked at the shops and restaurants right there in the neighborhood area. One time I came home to see her sprawled out, asleep on the porch, in front of the door, her wig tightly in her hands. When I got curious one day and looked in the fridge, I found a bag of dead cicadas. And wouldn't you know it, she was obsessed with this painting. She would talk about it all the time for some reason. So she was weird, overbearingly weird. It came together a little bit more for me when I found a pill bottle of hers, now being used for spices, and being the nosy idiot that I am, I Googled the medication. I can't for the life of me remember what it was, but it was some kind of heavy-duty antipsychotic crap. One day, Em came back to visit. She told me she had been in Kay's room and found, stapled to the ceiling, a disgusting collection of used condoms. Em came back one day with all her stuff to move back in, and Kay flipped out. They had allegedly agreed that the sublease was over on this day, but Kay insisted that it wasn't. After a big argument, Kay decided that she would stay out in her hammock for the remainder of her time there. A few days later, I came home from work and found my roommates and several friends sitting around, their eyes wide open. Apparently, while I was gone, Kay had come home with a much older man, locked herself in the bathroom with him, and had loud sex for a long, long time. Then she came out and told everyone present that she had gotten her revenge for kicking her out. We discovered that this revenge involved taking all of her used condoms and emptying the contents all over the bathroom. She then began crying uncontrollably and left the house, and we never saw her again. It was just so gross. That doesn't mean she wasn't still around. Her stuff mysteriously disappeared one day, and no one had seen her come back for it. Even more troubling, the keys to the basement had gone missing. We worked up the balls to go down there and look around, but found no trace of her. It didn't matter. As long as she had those keys, she could get in and out whenever she wanted. And we would all occasionally swear we heard voices down there. Before Kay, the house was a little creepy. After Kay, for some reason, the house became just downright disturbing, and all of it centered around this painting. One night I was in the living room with a few friends, and no one else was home. I was telling them about Kay and about how creepy the house was in general. As soon as I got to the part about the painting, almost on cue, the painting flew off the wall. But it didn't fall, it flew and landed all the way across the room, which would have been impossible if it was just a hook or whatever that fell off the wall. We looked at each other, shocked, and we got out of there and down the street as fast as we could. We just ended up walking around for a bit, but it was my house and I eventually had to go back. And another time, on multiple occasions, I walked into the living room to find the painting upside down. I would get furious about this, thinking my roommates were messing with me, but with how angry I was and how I talked to them about it, I could see it in their eyes that nobody was responsible. Our neighbors had a cat who would just waltz around into our house like he owned it, and we thought it was kind of funny, so we would let him. He was a good cat, so it wasn't really a problem. One night I was walking through the living room with the lights off, and I heard the cat make a noise. I didn't know he was in the house, and we didn't keep food around, so I wanted to let him out. I turned on the light and looked over in the corner where I heard the noise. The painting was sitting there, leaning against the wall. That was the last straw, and I insisted that my roommate bring it back to her studio. All at once, everything stopped. All this paranormal activity stuff just stopped. No more unsettling feelings in the house, no more voices in the basement, nothing. So, what I learned from this experience is this: no one obviously wants to live out a horror movie. At least when you're in your own horror movie, you eventually get some kind of explanation for the haunting or whatever is going down. What's even more terrifying, though, is being the roommate in the horror movie. I never had an explanation, but what the hell? Why was Kay the way she was? And what was that connection with the painting? Did it somehow, I don't know, influence her behavior or something? I don't know. I never will. It sounds like Kay was already, had some mental problems and stuff going on, some weird energies around her. But then maybe the painting was more able to influence her and just make it worse or something. It's kind of hard to know what was going on, but there seems to be some kind of connection there. When she came, it seems like her unsettling energy that was kind of, who she is, sort of magnified things when her energy and then the painting's energy combined or something. It's pretty weird, isn't it? A strange experience. For some background, my friend lived with his parents, and his home was in a pretty secluded but nearish to the suburbs area at that time. And his mom was home with him, and she was in the shower at that time of the occurrence. So the story goes that one day he was sitting in his room with the window open doing his regular exercises that he often did. And then suddenly from outside of the house, he heard his mom call and asking him where he put the shirt he had borrowed from her. He didn't borrow such a shirt, and he replied by saying such. He thought it was weird that his mother was outside and asking about a shirt, but he just kind of wrote it off, and he just continued with what he was doing. But he looked out his window, and he couldn't see his mother anywhere after a while. So he got up and out of his room, realizing that the water was still running in his parents' shower. And that was odd. He was kind of weirded out by now, so he went downstairs and he called out for his mom. And her voice answered from behind the shut and locked door. He says that her voice was very sweet and tender, using a tone of voice that she would have used when he was little. And she asked him, "Corey, please let me in." Corey isn't his real name, by the way, just not going to use his real name. And then he said he heard the water shut off from the shower. And then there was this sound like claws rolling down the front door. And he could hear his mother's voice from behind the front door, again asking to be let in. And it was followed immediately by a "Corey, I love you," with the sounds of this, this horrible claw-like thing kind of rolling down the door at the same time as I heard the voice saying, "Corey, I love you." Anyway, he very quickly backed away from the door, terrified, and he rushed upstairs to get his gun. But as soon as he came back downstairs, the voice and the rolling kind of scratchy claws were gone. No trace, no nothing of who or what it could possibly have been. And to this day, he doesn't have an answer to what the hell happened, and neither does his mom. There are these kind of old stories in Europe and probably other parts of the world too about changelings. Like was it walk-ins or something? Maybe they're called that too now, where some entity, some evil spirit or whatever, or maybe not necessarily evil, but anyway, some entity can actually just take over a person and just drive them away from their body and take over the body in their place. This almost kind of reminds me of something like that, like this being was maybe drove his own mom out of her body and just sort of took over this body of his mom. I don't know. Pretty terrifying, though. Can hardly imagine how he must have felt.